Okay, so today I'm going to be walking through doing valve clearances on the Hunter 350. So to begin with, just taking off the side panel here to get access to the seat tab, to remove the seat, then we can get to the fuel tank. So it's just taking off the side panel with your key, little eyelet here, pulling that, then you can remove the seat by pulling it up and backwards. So the first thing you have to do is take off the fuel tank. The fuel tank is just held on by one bolt going through the little bit here. So it's a 10mm on one end and an 8mm on the other end. So once that's removed, I just lift it up and I just use a little piece of wood to hold it so that I have better access for underneath the tank. You can use a piece of wood and you can turn it sideways and long ways and this way and that, so you can lever the tank up more if you need. First off is the fuel line, so it's just pushing on either side of it to undo the little clip, and then you can pull it back outwards. There is fuel in this line, so if you put a rag underneath it or just drain it out into a little cup or something, but there is fuel in the line, so just be aware of that. There's a little electrical connector at the in front of that, which is also just a little squeezing pin to release it, and then you can pull that one out as well. Before we turn the tank off though, there is two more little hoses, little breather hoses up in the center underneath the tank. They're not held in by anything, so you can just pull them off. So just take off the tank. It's just a matter of lifting upwards and backwards. It's just sitting at the front on some it's like rubber stops, so it can be a little bit tough to pull off. I would recommend getting your fuel tank nice and low for doing this, for doing your valve clearances, so that your fuel tank's nice and light, and it's easier to lift up and move around. So next up we have to do these three sort of brass looking screws here. They're 10mm heads. Just undo those ones. It's probably best to undo the bottom left one first and then the top two, because the top two hold the little bracket to the frame. If you undo those two first, then it's a bit tricky to get that bottom one off. I did the top two, loosen them first, because I didn't know that at the time. Once this is undone, you'll be able to like swing a bunch of the cables off to the left-hand side of the bike, and I just swung them off and then held up all of it with a cable tie, just to keep it all out of the way, just to clear the space above the valve cover. You should be able to just pull the lead off the spark plug to go with the rest of this assembly to keep it out of the way. So then it's just three 10mm bolts going in, holding the valve cover down. So just undo those three. Bit finicky to take off the valve cover. I found lifting it upwards at the front of the bike and then twisting it out was the easiest way to get off. It's sort of at the back that it's a bit tight. There are some more cables and components you can remove on the bike to get more stuff out of the way, but I just don't want to take too much off. Make sure you separate the little gasket for the valve cover as well, because you want to keep that. I found that this gasket, you can buy replacement ones, but I found after 500 kilometers it felt pretty still soft enough. It wasn't hardened up or anything, so I'm just going to reuse my one. Next up we have to remove the spark plug. So just it's a matter of taking your smaller spark puller and undoing that and taking that one out. So while I was here and I had my feeler gauges out anyway, I decided to double check the gapping on my spark plug. And I found my one was a bit out of spec, it was a bit too wide, so I pushed that in a bit because I had too much wheel room. So then we're going to take, I think it was a 14mm hex to undo this cover for the crank access. There's an O-ring on this little cover, so make sure you don't lose the O-ring. So now you can get a socket in there and rotate it so you can rise and lower the cylinder, because we've got to get the cylinder to top dead center. Make sure you're going anti-clockwise or counterclockwise here. You can see, we know it's in top dead center because you'll see this little tab has appeared because it rotates with the chain assembly, and it says TDC for top dead center, which makes that sure that's horizontal and at the top. So now for the valve adjustment, this is the actual valve adjustment. You just got to undo this little nut here, and then from inside that nut, there's a little piece, a little screw that has a gap on the top that you'll be able to adjust with. So for the inlet, it's a 0.08mm. So I just like to put that in there to begin with. So it's nice and loose here. I'm just resting that there. You can use anything like a screwdriver or something, as long as you get in there, like a coin, even a very thin coin. I just happen to have a razor blade from doing some window tinting, so I just used that because it was about the right size. And I'm just tightening that onto the feeler gauge. So you want it to not be, you still want to be able to move the feeler gauge around. You want it to not quite be scraping, but quite, you got to have a good amount of feedback that it's grabbing against the feeler gauge, but not scraping. Once you've adjusted that to where you want it, you've got to tighten up that nut again so that it doesn't move freely. Be aware that when you're tightening this nut, sometimes it'll tighten the valve with it a bit, because it'll pull it with, tighten it down with it. So you may have to loosen it off again. Just double check after you've tightened down the screw or the nut there that it's you can still move your feeler gauge around. So I can still feel mine. It's got a bit of pull on it, but it's not like really scraping or anything. So yeah, it's just showing here how sort of it's again, it's a very thin feeler gauge, 0.0mm, so it's a bit hard to actually push it in there to probe it, but it does go in, and then you can move it around a bit, and I can feel it pull. I can feel it pull. You can feel it moving against the edges of the feeler gauge, and so yeah, 0.08mm on the inlet, which is towards the back of the bike. Towards the front of the bike is the exhaust valve, and I did this one, and it's meant to be at 0.18mm on the exhaust. Both of my valves were tighter than spec to begin with, so I loosened both of them. And just be aware that you're loosening both of them, or generally loosening both of them. This I've seen, sorry for the ratio, 10mm to when you're putting the valve cover back on, you've just got to torque it down to 10 Nm. I didn't show the whole process of putting it together. You're just doing exactly the disassembly process. You're doing it in reverse. Just make sure you get that gasket seated nicely. It can be quite tricky. And so that's all there is to checking your valves and tightening up. And then I just got a bit of clip of after I'd done all that and just taking it for a ride. With both my inlet and my inlet and exhaust valves, I had to loosen both of them, and I ended up having a bit more tappet noise than when I first got my bike. Apparently that's quite normal. Most people have to loosen their valves. Their valves are too tight. Is what I found from forums and stuff, and most people end up having more tappet noise after their first service. So just be aware of that. If you're at all concerned, go see a dealer or a mechanic, and they'll let you know. Generally, it's better to hear a tappet than to not hear a tappet, because if you can't hear a tappet, it's probably too tight or something's wrong. But if you can hear it, that's fine.
but don't you try. It's a pointless way to die. I don't see you when I open my eyes. I need to be near you. Is anyone out there? It's easy, but don't you try. It's a pointless way to die. I don't see you when I open my eyes. I need to be near you. Is anyone out there? Is anyone out She's leaving, but she don't know why. Finds a bottle to ease her mind. She starts screaming and she starts to cry. She knows she's alone now. Is anyone out there? Is anyone out there? Is anyone out there? deepness can get through when you live a life without a clue. And you're looking into cold green eyes. Suddenly the deepness can get through. Realize I fall along with you. And you're looking into cold green eyes. Suddenly the deepness can get through. Realize I fall along with you. And we're looking into cold green